Welcome back. We are jumping right into the 27th night of Scheherazad's storytelling marathon. Deep in the court of the King of China, the mood is, to put it mildly, tense. There are several lives hanging by a thread, and you get the feeling the king's patience has completely run out.
So, just to catch you up, the Christian merchant had just spun this long, pretty complicated tale of his own. He was really hoping to wow the king, to prove his story was way more amazing than the bizarre incident with the dead hunchback. But his story totally fell flat, and the king, yeah, he was done listening.
And just like that, the sentence came down. No debate, just a cold, simple statement. Every single storyteller, the Christian, the Jew, the steward, plus the tailor who kicked this whole mess off, they were all sentenced to death. Their stories had failed. The executioner was on his way.
But right as the guards are moving in, and all hope seems lost, a voice cuts through the tension. And you know who it is? It's the king's own steward, the guy in charge of the royal kitchen. And he has one last, desperate card to play.
He steps forward, bows to the king, and makes this incredibly bold claim. He says he knows the story so shocking, so out there, that it'll make everything the king has heard so far seem totally boring. He's literally betting their lives on his story. And the king, well, his curiosity gets the better of him. He agrees to hear it.
So the steward's tale starts at this fancy dinner party he was at just the night before. There's this incredible feast, but one of the guests practically jumps back in horror from one specific dish. It's a sweet and savory meat stew called zirbajah. The guy absolutely refuses to touch it.
Of course, everyone else is like, come on, just try it. But he is dead serious. He says his refusal isn't about being a picky eater. It's about some past trauma. He claims that this exact dish caused a huge tragedy in his life. Well, now everyone at the party is dying to know what on earth could have happened.
So the man finally gives in, but he has one condition. And this is where it gets really weird. He demands this super elaborate ritual. He has to wash his hands 40 times with potash, which is this old-school cleansing salt. Then another 40 times with an herb called cyperus, and then a final 40 times with soap.
Yes, you heard that right. That is 120 separate hand washings before eating one dish. It's completely obsessive. The hosts are just staring, totally bewildered, but they bring him everything he asks for. And he goes through the entire ritual meticulously before he finally reaches for the zirbajah. And as he's eating, with this trembling hand, the other guests see it. The thumb on his right hand, it's just gone. And then they look closer, and oh my gosh, the thumb on his left hand is missing too. The man then shows them his feet, and both of his big toes have been cut off. Suddenly, this whole thing about the zirbajah stew just got incredibly dark.
So now, the man starts to tell his story. The story that explains the crazy ritual and his horrifying injuries. It all began, he says, back when he was a young merchant in Baghdad during the reign of the famous caliph, Harun al-Rashid. He says one day, this absolutely stunning woman, surrounded by servants, came into his shop. The moment she lifted her veil, he was completely, utterly starstruck. He finds out she's a favorite handmaiden of Lady Zubaydah, the caliph's wife. So, he's hopelessly in love with someone totally unattainable.
But it turns out she feels the same way. The problem? Meeting is basically impossible. The only way to see her is to smuggle him into the caliph's palace, which, by the way, is a crime that gets you killed. But he's willing to risk it all. So they hide him inside a giant chest, and he gets carried right past the palace guards and deep into the women's private quarters.
And the crazy thing is, the gamble pays off. He's brought right in front of Lady Zubaydah, and she's so charmed by this young merchant that she doesn't just approve of their love, she officially sanctions their marriage, saying the handmaiden is like a daughter to her. The palace celebrates for 10 straight days with feasts and music. It's a fairy tale.
So after all that pining and celebrating, the wedding night is finally here. The young merchant is brought to his bride, ready for the moment he literally risked his life for. But the romantic, blissful night he was dreaming of was about to become an absolute nightmare.
He was expecting this passionate embrace, right? The storybook ending to their dangerous romance. Instead, he reaches for his bride, and she sniffs his hand, and then pulls back with a scream of pure, unadulterated rage.
And that was her furious question. See, at the wedding feast earlier, he'd eaten the zirbajah stew, and, in all the excitement, he forgot to wash his hands properly afterwards. Now, to you and me, that's a minor slip-up. To her, it was a crime worthy of a monster.
And right here, the whole story just flips from romance to this chilling tale of obsession.
Before he can even figure out what's happening, she grabs a whip and just beats him senseless until he passes out. When he finally comes to, he hears her announcing his punishment to her servants. The hand that committed this crime, she says, must be cut off from his body.
Now here's the truly cruel part. She doesn't do it right away. She leaves him locked up, in agony and terror, for 10 whole days. And then she comes back. Not with forgiveness, oh no. She comes back holding a razor, ready to carry out the punishment herself.
Her servants hold him down, while she, completely calm, begins to mutilate him. She takes that sharp razor and slices off his right thumb, then his left. Then she moves down to his feet and cuts off both of his big toes. She even treats the wounds to make sure he doesn't bleed to death. And then, looking down at her broken husband, she makes one final demand.
And there you have it. That's the origin story. She forced him to swear a sacred oath that if he ever ate zirbagia again, he had to wash his hands exactly 120 times first. And that, he tells the dinner party, is why he has to do his bizarre ritual.
So back in the court of the King of China, the steward finishes this absolutely insane story of love, obsession, and mutilation over a forgotten bit of etiquette. He bows, his story's over, he's made his bet, and now all he can do is wait for the king to pass judgment.
I mean, after a story like that, a story about the caliph's own palace, about a punishment that bizarre and that brutal, surely that has to be more wondrous than the story of the hunchback, right? Surely they're all going to be spared?
But the king was just unmoved. He looks right at the steward and delivers this absolutely stunning final verdict. He says, the story of the hunchback is still better. The steward's tale wasn't good enough, the death sentence stands.
And with that, Scheherazade ends the 27th night on maybe her biggest cliffhanger yet. The storytellers are completely out of time and they're out of stories. With the executioner basically knocking at the door, is there anyone left who has a story powerful enough to save them all? We are going to have to find out next time.